Flight A97 of SkyGlobe Airlines sat on the wet runway of Manila International Airport, its massive engines humming like a beast preparing to leap into a storm. The rain had not stopped for hours, and the sky was a thick curtain of dark clouds streaked with lightning. Passengers huddled beneath umbrellas as they climbed the boarding stairs, unaware that they were walking into an ordeal that would become one of the most unforgettable events in aviation history. A 97 wasn't feared because of mechanical issues or superstitions. It was feared because it flew the Storm Belt Corridor, a route infamous among pilots for unpredictable weather, sudden downdrafts, and long stretches without radar contact. Only SkyGlobe's most seasoned captains took this flight, and on this evening, Captain Reyes and First Officer Laurel were in charge. Both had survived rough flights before, but nothing prepared them for what was coming. Inside the plane, passengers settled into their seats. Children played with tablets, business travelers scanned emails, elderly couples prayed quietly. Among them sat Arjun Malik, an off-duty mountain rescue officer returning home after months of saving stranded climbers in Nepal's freezing peaks. He carried only a backpack and a quiet exhaustion. He wasn't looking for trouble. He was looking for sleep. But 4 passengers near the rear of the aircraft weren't passengers at all. They had boarded wearing forged mechanic badges and carrying toolboxes that were not tools at all, but cleverly disguised weapons. They didn't speak to anyone. They didn't laugh, smile, or show nervousness like normal travelers. They exchanged silent glances that carried purpose, calculation, and danger. The men were part of a criminal syndicate that specialized in airborne robberies. Their plan was simple: hijack Flight A97, divert it to a remote island, force wealthy passengers to hand over valuables, and escape before authorities could respond. They had rehearsed every step, studied every weakness in the airline's safety procedures, and even predicted the timing of the storm to avoid early radio detection. As flight attendants performed safety demonstrations, one of the disguised robbers scanned the cabin. He mentally marked the strongest passengers, the emergency exit positions, and the nearest obstacles. Everything had to unfold perfectly. Arjun noticed the men briefly, not enough to suspect danger, but enough for them to register as unusual. Their eyes were too alert, their posture too stiff. He felt an instinctive prick of caution, the same instinct that had saved him during a rockfall in the Himalayas. But he brushed the feeling off, telling himself he was merely tired. The plane roared down the runway, splashing through rain, and then lifted into the air. Manila's lights disappeared beneath the clouds. Turbulence began almost immediately, rattling the overhead bins. A few passengers gasped, but the crew reassured them. "This is normal for this route," a flight attendant said with a practiced smile. But nothing about tonight would be normal. As the aircraft pierced deeper into the storm, lightning illuminated the cabin in quick flashes. In one flash, the disguised robbers exchanged cold nods. In another, one of them placed his hand on the latch of his toolbox. The storm wasn't an obstacle to them. It was their cover. Arjun closed his eyes, planning to sleep, but something still bothered him. He remembered how one of the men walked. They moved like people expecting sudden action, not a long flight. That strange detail replayed in his mind like a subtle warning. He forced himself to relax, unaware that his instincts were exactly right. In the cockpit, Captain Reyes frowned at the worsening weather. "We're entering the corridor early," he muttered. First Officer Laurel adjusted the controls, reducing speed for safer handling. The turbulence grew stronger, making the cabin tremble as if the plane were shivering. Passengers tightened seatbelts. Some whispered prayers. Far behind them, The four men prepared. One quietly unlocked his toolbox. Another pulled a mask halfway from his pocket. Third tapped his wrist in a coded rhythm. Asterisk and their leader, a cold-hearted man known as Viper, adjusted the hidden weapon beneath his jacket. Asterisk they waited for the moment when the lights flickered, when turbulence masked the sound of their first move, when fear in the cabin would make resistance less likely. Asterisk lightning flashed again. Thunder roared. And the world's most dangerous plane carried 226 souls deeper into the storm strait, into the hands of men who had no intention of letting it reach its destination. Asterisk. Something terrible was about to begin. Asterisk. Turbulence struck Flight in 97 with a sudden jolt, the kind that made cups rattle, seatbelts tighten, and nervous passengers grip armrests. The plane dipped sharply, causing a ripple of gasps through the cabin. To most people on board, it was simply bad weather. But to the four disguised robbers, it was the long-awaited signal. Asterisk Viper, their leader, nodded subtly. The others responded without a word. Their timing had been rehearsed down to the second. They needed fear. Fear created confusion, and confusion created opportunity. Asterisk. The lights flickered as the aircraft pushed deeper into the storm. Then, in one fluid, terrifying motion, Viper opened his toolbox and pulled out a compact submachine pistol. Another robber yanked down a ski mask. The third stood up abruptly, pushing aside a startled flight attendant. The fourth blocked the aisle, preventing passengers from rushing forward. Asterisk. A piercing scream erupted from the middle rows. Someone yelled, "They have guns!" Chaos exploded instantly. Asterisk. Everyone sit down and shut up. Viper roared, his voice cutting through the cabin like a blade. He fired a short burst into the ceiling, not to harm anyone, but to crush resistance before it could form. The gunfire silenced the cabin into trembling obedience. Asterisk. Arjun Malik, seated near the wing, jolted upright. His instincts kicked in immediately. The men he had been suspicious of were now openly brandishing weapons. For one quick moment, he scanned his surroundings. Two elderly passengers beside him shaking, a mother shielding her child, and a flight attendant frozen with terror. Asterisk. Arjun's heart thudded in his chest, but his breathing remained steady. He did not panic. Panic never helped anyone. Asterisk. The youngest robber, a jittery man named Kiro, struggled to control his breathing. Lightning frightened him, and now with the gunfire and screaming passengers, he looked like someone barely holding himself together. Arjun noticed it instantly. Weak link. Asterisk. Viper pushed a flight attendant toward the cockpit. "Open it, now." Asterisk. She hesitated, but when Viper pressed the cold metal of his weapon against her temple, she forced herself to obey, hands shaking uncontrollably. The cockpit door clicked open, a sound that felt heavier than thunder itself. Asterisk. Captain Reyes spun in his seat. What is the meaning of this? Asterisk. Viper advanced, waving the gun. Hands off the radio. Redirect us to coordinates I give. Now. Asterisk. First Officer Laurel tried to stand, but Viper pointed the gun straight at him. Sit, unless you want the passengers behind you to start dying. Asterisk. The pilots exchanged a stony glance. With 226 lives at risk, they had no choice but to comply. Asterisk. Back in the cabin, the other robbers forced passengers to hand over phones and valuables. A woman sobbed uncontrollably as they ripped jewelry from her wrists. A businessman tried to protest and received a brutal strike to the face. Asterisk. But not everyone was frozen in fear. Asterisk. Flight attendant Mira Santos moved silently between rows, pretending to provide comfort, but in reality, studying the hijackers' positions and their blind spots. When she reached Arjun's seat, he whispered to her without looking up, "Count their reloads. Watch the nervous one, and wait for turbulence." Myra understood instantly. This was someone who could help. Someone trained. She nodded subtly and moved on. The plane suddenly dropped again. A violent plunge that made oxygen masks sway. Passengers screamed and clutched their seats. Kiro screamed too. He held his weapon incorrectly, fingers trembling so badly he nearly dropped it. Viper shot him a furious glare. "Get a hold of yourself." But Kiro couldn't. His fear was raw and uncontrollable, and it radiated into the air like smoke. Arjun watched him carefully, memorizing each movement. Meanwhile, in the cockpit. Viper forced the pilots to enter new coordinates. "We're headed to Black Reef Island," he growled. "Remote, abandoned, perfect." Captain Reyes felt sweat drip down his neck despite the cool cockpit air. He knew Black Reef, no radar, no communication, no witnesses. "Once we land," Viper said, "you'll shut off all systems and we'll take what we want. Follow instructions and maybe we let you live. Maybe." Back in the cabin, tension thickened like fog. Children cried. Adults whispered prayers. Everyone waited in helpless dread. Arjun assessed the entire plane. 4 hijackers, but only 2 were truly dangerous, the leader Viper and the tall, muscular man controlling the aisle. The 3rd robber was alert but not particularly strong. And the 4th Kiro was practically falling apart. Good. Very good. The storm outside intensified. Thunder growled like a hungry beast. Arjun knew the next turbulent pocket could create the distraction he needed. But he also knew acting too soon could get people killed. He whispered into the sleeve of his jacket. "Wait, just a little longer." Then. Quietly, Mira passed him a folded napkin. He opened it discreetly. Inside was a small metal fork, the kind used for in-flight meals. Not a weapon, but a tool. A symbol. A promise that he was not alone. Arjun looked up. Myra's eyes met his. From across the aisle. The silent plan had begun. The storm outside intensified until the entire aircraft felt like a tin can tossed through the sky. Lightning cracked so close that passengers could see its white glow flickering through the windows. Each jolt made the overhead bins rattle and the fuselage groan. For the hijackers was an inconvenience. For Arjun Malik, it was an opportunity. He watched the trembling robber Kiro struggle to stay balanced. Each time the plane lurched, Kiro's weapon pointed dangerously toward random passengers. Fear twisted his face into panic. Viper barked commands at him, but it only made him more unstable. Arjun waited, breathing slow, patient. Timing was everything. Flight attendant Mira passed through the aisle again, pretending to check passengers. As she neared Arjun, she made her move. She tripped, intentionally knocking an empty food tray toward the tall hijacker guarding the aisle. The metal tray clattered loudly and skidded across the carpet. It drew his attention, just enough. Arjun rose slightly from his seat. Testing the hijacker's reaction, the robber jerked the weapon in his direction. "Sit down." Arjun lifted his hands in surrender and sank back. Not yet. Not until conditions aligned perfectly. Another violent jolt hit the plane, and this time even Viper stumbled in the cockpit. Doorway. "Stupid storm," he muttered, gripping the overhead rail. Captain Reyes tried to use the moment to reach a hidden emergency switch, but Viper caught him. "Don't try anything clever. You're close to dying as it is." The pilots exchanged helpless looks. Back in the cabin, the tall robber Goran pressed the barrel of his gun against Myra's shoulder. "Next time you drop something, I shoot you." Myra didn't flinch. Her eyes flicked toward Arjun, barely a second of contact. but enough to say we're still on plan. Arjun's fingers tightened around the metal fork Myra had given him. A tiny object, almost meaningless. But in trained hands, even the smallest tool could become leverage. Another pocket of turbulence struck hard. It felt like the plane dropped several meters in a free fall. Passengers screamed. Luggage tumbled. From overhead bins, Kiro shrieked, covering his head with both hands and accidentally dropping his weapon entirely. That was the moment. Arjun exploded from his seat. He moved with a speed and precision birthed from years of mountain rescues and crisis situations. Before Kiro could even register what was happening, Arjun had crossed the aisle, kicked the fallen weapon away, and wrapped an arm around Kiro's neck in a hold that immobilized him without causing fatal harm. Kiro's scream choked off into a wheeze. Panic made him flail wildly, but there was no strength behind his movements. Arjun whispered sharply, "Stop struggling, or you will pass out." Kiro froze, trembling. Passengers gasped. They had seen someone challenge the hijackers and succeed. Goran reacted instantly, raising his gun. "Stop or I shoot." But two unexpected heroes sprang into action. The retired martial arts coach who had been quietly observing the chaos stood up and threw himself at Goran's legs with surprising agility. For a man in his 60s, Goran staggered backwards. At the same moment, Myra shoved a service card forward with all her strength. It slammed into Goran's knees, making him collapse to the floor. His weapon fired uselessly into the ceiling, sending sparks raining down. Now chaos worked in favor of the passengers. Arjun shoved Kiro into a seat and ripped off a seatbelt to restrain him. The young robber didn't resist, he was too terrified. The third robber rushed down the aisle toward Arjun, rage twisting his face. Arjun stepped back, letting the turbulence sway his body just enough to dodge the first swing of the robber's fist. Then he counterattacked, driving his elbow into the robber's ribs. The man wheezed painfully, but didn't fall. He swung again. Arjun parried the blow and used the fork small, insignificant to jab into the robber's wrist, causing him to drop his weapon with a cry of pain. It clattered down the aisle far from reach. Arjun then grabbed the man's jacket, spun him around, and forced him face first into the nearest seat. Passengers cheered, shouting encouragement they would never have imagined themselves capable of minutes earlier. Only one hijacker remained. Unrestrained Viper he appeared from the cockpit, fury blazing in his eyes. "I said nitrogen monoxide heroes." His gun was aimed squarely at Arjun's chest. The cabin went silent. Even the storm seemed to pause. Viper stepped forward, snarling, "You think you can stop me? I will shoot the next person who moves." A child whimpered. A woman sobbed. Mira held her breath. Arjun stared straight into Viper's eyes. "If you were going to shoot me," he said calmly, "you would have already done it." Viper hesitated, and that was all the pilots needed. Suddenly, Captain Reyes burst out from behind Viper, tackling him from the rear. The gun fired, but the shot went wide. Arjun lunged forward, grabbed Viper's wrist, and twisted sharply. The weapon clattered to the floor. Viper roared in anger and fought like a man possessed, but Arjun had faced desperate men before. He pinned Viper to the ground with raw determination. Passengers shouted, "Tie him! Tie him!" Several belts were passed forward, and together Arjun and the pilots restrained Viper fully, securing him to a seat like an enraged animal. The cabin erupted with cheers, relief, gratitude, disbelief. But the celebration was short-lived, because now, with the hijackers subdued, someone had to save the storm-battered plane from crashing. Asterisk that task was far from over. The storm outside still raged with merciless intensity, but inside Flight and 97, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The hijackers were restrained, the passengers were no longer frozen in fear, and hope began to bloom like light filtering through a crack in a dark cave. But despite their victory, danger still loomed because the plane was in critical trouble. Asterisk the cockpit door hung open, damaged during Viper's last desperate attempt to regain control. Arjun, breathing heavily after the fight, entered the cockpit with Captain Reyes and First Officer Laurel. The pilots immediately strapped in, hands flying over controls with practiced urgency. Warning lights flashed across the panels. A synthetic voice repeated, "Stall warning, stall warning." Asterisk First Officer Laurel cursed under her breath. "We're losing altitude. Storm updraft knocked us off course." Asterisk Captain Reyes checked the navigation instruments. Radios jammed, GPS is glitching, and we're flying blind. Asterisk Arjun stared through the cockpit window. Nothing but blackness and streaks of rain. The plane felt like it was being tossed on invisible waves. Asterisk, what can I do? Arjun asked. Asterisk, make sure nobody panics, Captain Reyes replied. A calm cabin helps us control the aircraft and keep those hijackers secured. Asterisk Arjun nodded and headed back into the cabin, where flight attendants Mira and Janelle were reassuring passengers. Children clung to their parents, adults prayed, and many stared at Arjun as if he were the only anchor in the chaos. Asterisk Myra hurried to him. How bad is it? Asterisk, we're still in danger, Arjun said quietly, but the pilots are fighting for us. We need to stay calm. No screaming, no sudden movements. Asterisk the passengers listened. They trusted him. After everything he'd done, how could they not? Asterisk another burst of turbulence flung the plane sideways. A scream erupted, but Mira raised her hands. Seat belts tight. Everyone stay down. Asterisk Arjun helped fasten a loose belt for an elderly man shaking violently. Across the aisle, the retired martial arts coach who had helped earlier assisted a mother with 2 small children. People were working together now, not strangers, but survivors. Asterisk, meanwhile, Viper struggled against his restraints, fury burning in his eyes. You think you've won? He hissed. That plane is going down. And you're all going with it. Asterisk Arjun met his glare calmly. No, not today. He tightened the last belt around Viper's wrists, ensuring the man couldn't break free. Then came a sudden sound, a piercing alarm blaring from the cockpit. Arjun rushed back inside. Captain Reyes was sweating, jaw clenched. We've entered a downward spiral. If we don't correct it now, we'll hit the water. Asterisk. How far are we from land? Arjun asked. Asterisk Laurel scanned the instruments. If the readings are right, Singapore. But we need a break in the storm to descend safely. Asterisk, as if nature itself heard her plea, the clouds ahead began to thin. A faint glow, soft, weak, but unmistakable, filtered through the gray sky. Asterisk there. Captain Reyes shouted, A clearing. Asterisk, the pilots angled the aircraft downward, fighting wind shear and turbulence. The plane shuddered, dipped, and scraped through the edge of the storm. Then, like emerging from an underwater world, visibility returned. Asterisk, and far below, glittering like a jewel against the dark ocean, was Singapore's Changi Airport. Asterisk, the runway lights shone through the drizzle, a beacon of salvation. Asterisk, this is it, Captain Reyes whispered. Brace for landing. Asterisk Arjun hurried out and shouted instructions to the passengers. Heads down, stay strapped, keep calm. Asterisk, the plane descended sharply. Landing gear deployed with a harsh mechanical groan. The storm wasn't done yet, whines. battered the aircraft from both sides, pushing it off alignment. Captain Reyes gripped the controls until his knuckles turned white. Come on, come on. The wheels met the runway with a massive impact. The aircraft bounced once, twice, skidded sideways, and then finally stabilized as the brakes screeched against the wet asphalt. Sparks flew. The plane slid another 100 meters before coming to a shaking, trembling halt. Silence. Then an eruption of cheers, sobs, and applause filled the cabin. They were alive. Emergency vehicles raced toward the plane. Firefighters and paramedics boarded quickly, helping passengers disembark. The hijackers were handed over to armed security officers, who dragged them away in cuffs. Arjun stepped onto the wet tarmac, feeling the cool rain on his face. Around him, passengers hugged him, thanking him with trembling voices. Myra approached, tears of relief in her eyes. You saved us, all of us. Arjun shook his head. We saved each other. Within minutes, journalists and cameras swarmed the area. Reporters shouted his name. People cheered, but Arjun simply smiled, humbled. No hero, he said softly. I did what anyone should do when lives are in danger. Sky Globe Airlines later awarded him the Sky Guardian Medal, and his story spread across the world, an ordinary man rising to extraordinary courage during the world's most dangerous flight. And with that, the tale of Flight in 97 came to a close. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel.